Well, this is Holy Saturday, Pat, is it? Holy Saturday?
Yeah, it is.
Do you feel
Yes.
particularly holy today?
Uh, no, no, but God bless everybody who does.
Ah, you're a sanctified man just the same. Well, I'm sure both our listeners are scratching their heads and wondering what the hell are they on a Saturday for, especially since they were on yesterday with our friend Gabriel McCaffrey. Uh, did you find that was a helpful contribution to have that conversation with Gabriel yesterday, Pat?
Yeah, that was Jude. Sometimes it's good to get an outside perspective. Gabriel is a guy who was brought up in Belfast and emigrated to Canada, and well, he got out of Belfast about the 1970s, and he's 35 years in Canada. I think he spent some years in Dublin. But it's interesting to get a perspective from somebody who's not, living on your doorstep, and he could see things from afar, and it was a new perspective, and it was very interesting. He's an intelligent guy and an articulate guy, and I thought he was excellent.
Yeah, yeah. I really thought he was a breath of fresh air. My wife says that at least there was one adult in the discussion. I don't know who she was thinking
Well, she was talking about me then.
of. Anyway, the reason we're on today is we want to talk a bit about Ray, our mutual friend, Ray Bassett, the former ambassador as it happens, to Canada. And I think a friend maybe of Gabriel's as well, Gabriel McCaffrey. But Ray Bassett is going to be giving the address, the Easter Sunday address in what's it called, Ullart, in County Wexford, tomorrow
Yeah.
morning, just before noon. And I thought it would be helpful if we talked a bit about the sort of views that Ray has, the kind of things that Ray's likely to emphasise, and to what extent we feel he's hitting all the right buttons or the right boxes. Um, how would you imagine that he might? What things do you think he might stress in his address, Pat?
Well, I would think Ray is going to have an overview. Ray was part of the delegation, the Irish delegation, the Dublin government delegation that took part in that process. He Ray's a very analytical guy, and apparently, as far as I remember, his notes about various things towards the end, the two governments had to present. They were sort of giving it. George Mitchell had told him he was out of there on basically Holy Thursday, Good Friday. Doesn't matter. He had a young son. He was leaving. So anyway, the two governments, or the Taoiseach and the Prime Minister, were going to see both the Irish government and the not the Irish government, going to see Sinn Féin and the unionists. So Ray apparently, his notes were used to sum up what the Sinn Féin position, what was an offer, and all the rest of it. And apparently, the two guys went to see Jerry Adams and so on, and he accepted it. And then they were going to see David Trumbull. So basically, the bottom line, Jude, was that there were these guys. I would think Gray will have it for all the Bassetts down the generations. It'll be a great honour to say my granda or great granda was a part of the Irish delegation that brought peace to the island of Ireland, and I think I would take that.
Yes, it's a great part. Well, I mean, he is proud of it, and rightly so, to be part of delivering the Good Friday Agreement, which I think, as we said yesterday, delivered peace, which everybody, I'd say an awful lot of people voted for that reason, but also
Yeah,
delivered other things like the referendum on the border. I think that was a
yeah,
key component in it. And I suspect that when Ray is giving his address tomorrow, that there'll be an emphasis on that. Do you think?
yeah. Ray, one of the things Ray has pointed out, Ray says he takes. I remember talking to him years ago, and he says he takes offence at this thing that the Good Friday Agreement is Sunningdale for slow learners. He says there's the Good Friday Agreement goes so much further. It fleshes out so many things. There's a whole thing about policing reform. There's a recognition of the Irish language, and which didn't really all happen that much. There's all sorts of things about cross-border trade, about different things. There are all those sort of detailed things, which none of which were mentioned really on the and Sunningdale. He says that it's a much more comprehensive document. There's also that principle of consent and so on. So he said it was a considerable move on and so on. Now, what basically I think what Ray's going to do, Jude, is they the Good Friday Agreement is now considered by people like the Americans as a format that they can sort of take across the world for peace negotiations. It was always considered an intractable division or dispute that would go on and on and on and on. Now, the work that it was, we were chatting yesterday, you know that constructive ambiguity. A lot of,
Yeah.
remember, I think you got on this thing about what was it? What was I can't remember now. The one you were getting about up. It was I think it was left open. You could read it either way. Oh, the Secretary of State. Remember, I
Oh,
was
yes,
struggling
yes.
there. Remember about the Secretary of State having the right to call a border
Mm-hmm.
poll, and you said you asked the question, does that not leave it so woolly that it can mean anything to anybody? But that was deliberate. But it left it enough. There was enough rope there for everybody to say, well, I can work with that.
Yeah. I think I still feel uneasy about it, but I guess it's one way of making sure that if people believe that there should be a border poll, they'll have to gather their evidence of that and present it to the Secretary of State. And that's kind of good rather than somebody deciding, well, we'll have a border poll now. There's an argument for it. Besides which fact, of course, the Secretary of State can't call it except he or she believes that it's going to be successful. I'm not
Yeah.
sure to what extent Ray will be talking about this. By the way, just this thing of Easter addresses, commemorating Easter, the Easter
Yeah.
Rising. Is that something that you've been a part of, Pat, over the years or not?
No, it isn't. No, I don't. I haven't gone to any of these Easter rising things. Dude, you know that I'm not sure. You know, there's all this symbolism of Christ rising and Easter rising and all the rest of it. And there's something about that I feel slightly uncomfortable about. And one of the things. Dude, this is true, and I remember somebody saying it to me one time. I think it might even been somebody like Eamon McCann or something.
Yeah.
That whole thing, the symbolism of Christ dying nailed to a cross. He said, as a child, he found that wild, disturbing. That the whole thing that I can't remember who it was. To me, tell you the truth, that it was something that he actually had nightmares about and stuff like that. And there is something I know very disturbing about that whole image of a human being being nailed to a cross and dying on the cross and all that sort of stuff. And then there's symbolism and republicanism of these guys going out today in 1916. And it's just my own brain, Jude. I'm sure other people are going, "What's he on about?" But that's the reality. I've just never quite felt comfortable with all that. Now, I believe, Jude, as I've made clear many times, that the people who live in a place have the right to govern themselves. I'm a Republican. I believe of democracy, the rule of the people, by the people, for the people. But that's simple.
I could quite understand what you're saying, Pat. I think we remember Pat Coyle. She did an interview for one of those books, and she talked about the pornography. There was almost pornography of suffering of Christ with the Stations of the
Yeah,
Cross, and it certainly
yeah,
is, terribly. And we agreed yesterday that if Good Friday was a very gloomy sort of a day. Whatever we were supposed to get
yeah,
out of it as young people spiritually, I don't think very many of us got it. But at the same time,
yeah.
I can stand back a bit and say, well, the resurrection of Christ fits in with the resurrection of
That's
the world. The
yeah,
world's coming alive again. Now, you only have to look out your window and you see, the trees, suddenly the green shoots coming out and you see the grass growing.
yeah,
So it's it's a
yeah,
symbolic as well as a literal time of rebirth. Um,
yeah. Well,
and,
but Jude, for us, like the Good Friday Agreement, people like Ray, like Ray Bassett, Ray would have probably saying, right, the Good Friday Agreement sort of give us all a chance at rebirth. Jude, no matter what anybody said, right? There was nearly 3,600 people, I think, died.
yeah,
I know mostly directly through violence, and then some died years later from injuries received and stuff like that. Right, 3,600. We worked it out somewhere if it was on mainland Britain, it'd be more than 100,000 people died violently over the top. Now, can you imagine 100,000 people died in
yeah.
Britain from communal violence?
No,
It would be unbelievable. But in a
wouldn't
small
happen.
place, Jude, I worked at the Daily Journal for basically 25 years. And the number of people, that I work with who had either somebody in jail, somebody shot dead. One of the guys in the work was shot dead on Bloody Sunday. so on. You could like there was no such thing. It was a sort of a distant. It was up close and personal.
Mm-hmm.
And Jude, the Good Friday Agreement brought an end to that. And when I listened to some people said, yesterday I think you alluded to him, Morris Morrow, but he was on Talkback yesterday, and he's saying the violence still goes on. Jude, there was 323 people I think died in 1972. Since about 2015, there've been about four incidents. So to try and compare like with like, that's ridiculous. There's an odd bushfire. The forest fire has been out for a long, long time.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. I think most people are aware of the benefits and the huge miraculous changes that come over society in the north. Certainly, I'm still thinking about what Ray might say in this. My guess is he'll focus on what's ahead rather than what's behind. He was a
Yeah,
part of the Good Friday Agreement negotiations, and he may well talk about that. But I suspect he'll be looking ahead and say, "Well, what things did we agree to?" And I know him he is a strong Republican, it's fair to say, and he attributes that to the fact that he went to the Christian Brothers in Dublin. But
yeah,
he I think would be arguing about what do we need to have for the vote on a border poll for unification to be valid? And I just think he'll come out quite strongly there. Would you
yeah.
think?
I'm no, I can't speak for you. I would maybe I would have maybe more a strong nationalist. He believes he's just he's an old styled Irish type person,
Hmm.
proud of the country and proud of what we can do,
Hmm.
and as you rightly say, proud of what we can achieve. And I think he believes that the island of Ireland can deliver so much more, and I believe that as well, as do you.
Hmm.
So I think but I think what he as a former diplomat, and we're talking about what we can do in the future. But the Good Friday Agreement, I think sometimes has been sort of written off by several people as not delivering it. Jude, it has delivered, and it continues to deliver, and hopefully in the years ahead we can build on it.
Well, I'd like to see, I think it has delivered and the peace has held despite everything. I think we should be looking at, and I suspect that Ray Bassett will be tomorrow will be looking at what we can do further. And the big further thing is a border poll. Now, you and I have
Yeah.
talked about this thing about 50% plus one. In other words, democracy in action. Do you think he's likely to stress that, or is that something that would he be in favor of saying, well, let's wait until we have the goodwill of and the vote of a majority of
No,
unionists?
I remember very clearly. Leo Varadkar, I can never. I might have been him in Mali. He did a program one time, and a major interview with the Tisha Leo Varadkar, and I think it was
Yeah.
on BBC. And he said that 50. Well, he was asked, and he says, "Oh no, I would like nearly a two-thirds majority before we'd even consider it," and so on. And I remember the next morning, Ray, we're friends on social media, and I saw a posting from Ray. He says, "Quite obvious, Varadkar neither understands nor has read totally the Good Friday Agreement."
Yeah.
Because he says if he reads it, he will see that it's 50 plus one. And then I think he's called Richard Humphreys. I read him. He's a High Court judge in Dublin. And he made the very simple point. He says, for parity of esteem, if 50 plus one is enough to maintain the union, 50 plus one is enough for unity. You can't have it both ways.
But yeah, would you not think that, he may say that indeed, do you not think that he would need to, and we would need to take into account what worries many people? Like, while democracy demands that 50% plus one is fine, very few people or a lot of people wouldn't want to have a vote that ended up with a big rump of malcontents among unionism, and the same kind of
Yeah.
problem maybe with a disgruntled minority in an all Ireland
Yeah,
state.
well, yeah, you know, all right, and I agree totally. But if democracy is to mean anything, if by threat or a threat of intimidation, whatever way you want to call that, that one group of people can hold a vast majority from achieving their legitimate political objectives, I think that democracy dies that day. So I
Mm.
don't buy that at all. I think as well. Jude, I said that I think I sent you someone from social media last night that quite a number. I think it was RT that he talked to a number of young unionists who are quite willing to consider now a United Ireland. They, Jude, I hold the view that the DUP's recent actions, particularly since Brexit, have done more to help the cause of nationalism than Sinn Féin could ever have done. They
Mm.
have alienated just about everyone, and I would think have alienated a lot of their erstwhile friends on the mainland because,
Mm.
as far as I can see, they're getting very little support from anywhere at Westminster.
I would agree with you by and large there. The the uh, the trouble is many people think that rather than young people, young unionists or young, Protestants or from a Protestant background, that them being indifferent to the union with Britain, that they are equally indifferent to the union of Ireland, and that they
Yeah,
simply aren't interested in politics. I think there might be a danger that we would assume that because they can't stand what the DUP is doing and the attitudes it strikes, that therefore they must be in favour of a united Ireland or think people who are pushing for it are in the right. I'm not sure that that's the case. Second thing
no,
is,
Jude, I don't think that's been said. But this sort of hard and fast, I'm willing to go out and die for it.
yeah,
That's what's different now.
yeah. Well, I think it's I you do well not to underestimate, I think, the extent to which many people in the South are fearful that if you had a majority, that you would have trouble in the North. Uh,
Yeah, well, I think, Jude, I think that's the basis on which loyalism, the recent sort of some of the recent threats and so on. I think that's the whole idea that if you think this is going to, we're going to, if you think you can have United Ireland peacefully, we're going to ensure that that doesn't happen,
well, it's
right? And
working.
I think what is the guy O'Leary, Professor? What I can't
Yeah,
remember his first name, and I
Brendan
think he was
O'Leary.
the guy who said Brendan O'Leary. I think he's one of the few who has addressed that and said if the Irish government is serious about unity, then we need to look at the possibility of violence down the road and make plans accordingly, including up in the army, including getting people involved in loyalism, et cetera, the same way the Brits did with the unfiltrated IRA and so on, that we do it in reverse and so on. But he says, like, but Jude, I have an acquaintance who was involved in loyalism years ago, and I was chatting to him back some time ago, and I asked, he said, Pat, I don't know how many young people were willing to sacrifice themselves and go out, risk either A, getting shot, or B, spending a long time in jail, or C, ruining their lives. Do you get I saw a PSNI guy on Monday, and he says, if you get a conviction nowadays for this sort of stuff, your job prospects, your life prospects just go down the pan. And
Mm-hmm.
many people, for me, the Brits don't want Northern Ireland. They don't want unions. It's quite obvious. What was it, 515 votes to 29? And they're doing also. I read a survey there quite recently. I think it's 48% or 15% or something of people surveyed said they couldn't care less if Northern Ireland left the union. So, like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an important point to hold on to when you talk about the possible loyalist backlash. It's rather different from the IRA. The IRA had a goal of some kind. What goal can the loyalists have?
uh,
They can't. If Britain doesn't want them, and I mean Britain has made patently clear it doesn't want them, then
yeah,
are they talking about an independent six counties? Not a chance. It'd be an
no,
independent two counties, as you've
yeah.
often pointed out. So I think we need to factor that in. That they really, the likelihood of widespread resistance to a democratic vote for a united Ireland. There's a terrible danger we would over exaggerate that, and as a result, have people pull back and be fearful. And the other thing I think that people forget about a bit is that, of course, the major parties in the South are going to poo-poo the idea of having a border poll and are going to heighten the notion that there might be a loyalist backlash. Why? Because if the day ever came when there was a border poll that was successful, the politics of the South is radically changed permanently.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and I
Do you
mean, who
remember
wants?
when you were chatting there, the thought came. Do you remember the famous Gusty Spence one when asked, what was the difference between Republican and activists and loyalists, and he said the difference is, he says, We know what we're fighting against. They know what they're fighting for. But basically, what he says, uh, the Republicans know what they're fighting against and know what they're fighting for. He says, all we know is what we're fighting against. We don't know what we're fighting for. And
Yeah.
that's a big difference.
That is a key point, all right. Okay, well, I think we'll sort of wrap it up now. But my
Yeah,
final point would be this, Pat. Um, I think there's a need for more concrete suggestions and structures to put people together who can, for the, like Bobby Sands. If you look at the mural of Bobby Sands in West Belfast, it says no one,
yeah,
however great or small, can everyone can make a contribution towards republicanism. I think that's being flouted at present. I believe everybody and anybody who wants to should be able to make a contribution towards strengthening the possibilities of a border poll and eventually achieving a United Ireland. It doesn't seem to me that that's being done. Am I exaggerating that, Pat? You don't share that?
no, I don't. I think you're being unnecessarily pessimistic. There's a lot. Me and you are talking about it regularly.
I know, but we're
I
two loonies.
that's right. What is it? St. John the Baptist speaking in the dark, did I? No, Jude, it comes up regularly in conversation. And it's it's not forced. It's not suddenly I suddenly start talking to something about something border pool. I go to the gym in Derry, and usually somebody says, "Geez, Pat, I wonder what's going to happen down the road." No, everybody knows we're in flux. Things are changing, and Jude, I've heard the number of social media, Jude, and you'll see how often it's met, and often by people who are not particularly political. Jude, we know things are changing. Brexit has changed things, protocols changed things, the demographics have changed things, and so what, the rise of Sinn Féin has changed things. So I don't buy it for a second, your pessimism. I think it's absolute. Jude, but you don't flick a switch and suddenly after 100 years, as Gabriel, our friend Gabriel McCaffrey said yesterday, it was 100 years experiment that has failed, and it has failed.
Well, I doubt anything of what you said. I agree completely. There is, people are aware of this and the possibilities it offers and so on. I'd even accept your fact about young unionists now being more open to the idea of a united Ireland. What I'm saying is, it's presently only at the level of people being in a sort of a positive mood about it.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
should be happening is there should be structures put in place so that people can work effectively to move things to the point where a border poll will be called. I don't think a border poll is called by people just chatting in the gym or somewhere like that. I think it's
No,
achieved where you have concrete actions, or you have movements, or you have letters, or you have citizens' assemblies, or whatever. That you have to have structures to get this to happen. Otherwise, it'll just wither on the vine. People say, I mean,
yeah,
just think for a
no,
moment. Be
Dublin,
warned by
the Dublin
Scottish
government,
nationalism, Pat. Be warned
uh,
by Scottish nationalism. Look what's happened to them.
yeah, yeah. That's no doubt about that. I knew a senior politician some years back. Remember the sort of, they were worried about all this the anniversaries, around 1916, and the Dublin government went out of their way to sort of thumb them down to such. Remember, they were going to put up a plaque that honoured all who died, and including British soldiers,
Mm.
dude, which was unbelievable. And France, when you put up a plaque mentioning the Nazis who took over, it was so ridiculous. And I think Micheál Martin's shared Ireland thing is deliberately 5 million kick the can down along the road. Oh no, of course we're interested, but we're trying to do it in a nice, soft way, and all the rest. Dude, shared Ireland could go for another 50 years and do nothing.
Yeah, yeah. You're absolutely right. The people who are resistant to the idea of a border poll or United Ireland, and that actually is Fine Gael and Fine Gael. And in ways, I don't
Yeah,
blame them, because all these are professional politicians, so their careers are
yeah,
built into this. If there
yeah,
was a United Ireland, they'd have to do some really serious soul searching and find ways of attaching themselves to something else. Um,
yeah.
but I still feel that it should be rather more, I don't know, concrete.
Concrete. Yeah,
I think the time has passed for thinking that, well, we all feel this is a good idea. A lot of people in
yeah,
Scotland thought Scottish independence was a good idea. A lot of people even thought it was inevitable. I would say
yeah.
it's been put back by 25 years inside a week.
That is,
Uh,
well, the arrest of the chief executive and the resignation of
yeah.
uh, what do you call her, Sturgeon, is
Uh,
definitely, and there's all sorts of now question marks about what's going on. That's done them immeasurable harm.
Oh yeah, I cannot rid myself of the thought that there might be dirty tricks going on in the background. Now I have no evidence for that whatsoever, but I can't see that something as important to Westminster or UK generally as its disintegration, which is what was being promised in the way Scotland was proceeding. That they wouldn't have had some hand, act, or part in the smashing of Scottish nationalism. I say beware, because the same thing applies to Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. They're not going to hand up the cosy situation they have without one hell of a fight. They're not going to. They're not Turkish who are going to vote for Christmas.
On that note,
having said that, this being Easter, happy Easter, Pat. Enjoy yourself.
Easter, Jude.
Don't eat too many
eggs. Enjoy
eggs.
yourself.
Drink lots of whiskey, no eggs. Okay.